HammerDownDyno Service, in conjunction with Bettler Brothers Racing, presents...
This is Brian from HammerDownDyno Service. Today I wanted to show you how to set the valve lash on your Briggs & Stratton V-Twin Slingshot racing engine. I have a motor here fresh back from Tobias, and I wanted to make sure, first of all, that the valves were set correctly, and show you what the process is. If you just want to check up on your engine, or if you're changing valve springs, you always want to check the lash afterwards and readjust it. It's the way that I do it is one of the most common ways. It's kind of contested throughout the racing world of how the correct way is. I'll tell you my way. Basically, what you want to do is rotate this motor over by hand with both spark plugs out so that there's no compression, until you're at the top of the compression stroke. So when you do that, you'll see as I'm spinning this motor over by hand that the valves are actuating through the camshaft and the push rods. This is your exhaust stroke, where the engine's pushing the exhaust gases out. It's going to come up to the top, and then your intake valve is going to open, and your piston's going to move down and suck the intake charge in. Now this is the stroke where you're going to set your valves. You can't see into the hole here, but what I like to do is stick a screwdriver or something down in there that isn't going to leave any type of remains in the combustion chamber. You want to keep it nice and clean in there, and then just slowly turn the motor over, and as you see the piston come up with that screwdriver to the very top, that's where you're going to set your valves. Both of these rocker arms should be a little bit loose at that point, and that's when you know you're at the correct spot. Some other people like to set it when the intake valve opens. It depends. Sometimes it depends on the camshaft, but I've always had luck and never had a problem setting it this way. Basically, what we're doing by setting the valve lash, I have one of the valves off over here. Your camshaft is pushing, the lobes are going to be pushing on the push rod here, and as that goes around, the push rod comes up and contacts the rocker arm through the keeper here. Now, there's a hole just the perfect size to fit the push rod in, and as you can see, it has threads on it, so that as your push rod sits in there, it's going to rock back and forth on this rocker arm. On the other end, the rocker arm has a smooth patch right here so that it can roll right over the valve stem, which is right here with your retainer and your valve spring, and that's going to open it to allow the intake charge into the engine. So you're basically setting the valve lash, can be measured between the valve stem and the rocker arm. There should be an air gap in there to allow both valves to close at the top of the compression stroke. That way there's no leaking or blowout of the compressed air. So what we're really setting is the gap between the valve stem and the rocker arm as an air measurement, but we're going to be using this adjuster screw to do it. Now on the outside you're going to see what looks like an ordinary hex nut. That's a 1/2 inch. So you take a 1/2 inch wrench, and on the inside there's a set screw type deal in there, and that happens to be a 5mm. So that's one of the rare cases where you'll have a metric end standard on the same fastener. So in order to break these free to adjust your valves, you want to take just a regular wrench and put it on to the hex nut, and then take the Allen head, put it onto that keeper, and just twist them both, loosening at the same time. That'll break it free. Once that's loosened, you can adjust this set screw in and out. Now what that's going to do is change, just like I was showing you, the pressure that's put on this push rod. If you tighten it too much, there's not going to be any lash, and it's going to open the valve all the time. And if you go too loose, you're going to make a lot of excess play, and you may end up losing a push rod, bending one, or just make the motor not run correctly. It's not going to take more than probably a 1/4 turn to get all the way out of the ballpark or open the valve too much. So once you have this 10mm, is, let's say you're reassembling the motor after you're putting valve springs in, you want to tighten this 10mm to the correct torque spec, If you don't have the correct torque spec, it's usually just a good hard snug tightening. You don't want to strip it out, but you just want it nice and snug so it's not going to come off. And then basically you take the wrench and the hex and you put it in there. Now from the factory, the cam that's built for the Tobias racing engines are said to have a .012 gap on the intake valve and a .014 gap on the exhaust valve. The cam manufacturer recommends this for any number of reasons. Either it makes the most power, or it makes the most torque, or it's the most reliable. And I haven't found any one of those three to be a dedicated reason, but it seems like a good overall guess. So since we have the exhaust side mounted up on this head, we're going to take a .014 gauge and put it in here. Now that I have it on this side all the way at the top, you should have a good measurement once this is loose. When you slide this in, it should be able to just fit underneath the valve stem. You see the bare valve stem here and this rocker arm. There's going to be a little bit of a gap in there. You don't want it to be too tight that you have to use a lot of force to get it in there, and you don't want it to be too loose that you can slop this feeler gauge around. These feeler gauges you can find at any auto parts store. They're only a couple bucks, and they're going to have the full range of adjustments on there that you want to measure. But once you put this in here, you should be able to slide it back and forth nice and snug, and you know that that's set right. Ron out at Tobias did a good job on this one. It's dead on at 14. You shouldn't be able to get the next size in there, which would be a .015, without really too much force. And if you try to go down to a .012 or a .013, you should feel that it's just a little bit too sloppy in there. And then after you set it and you get it where you like it, rotate the motor over a few times and then check it again. Because as everything moves around and takes a set in there, it can change a couple thousandths. You're going to want to check it again. So when you're going to adjust the valves, make sure you have plenty of time, you're not in a rush, and you can do it correctly. And by doing this, you're going to preserve the life of these valve springs that are mandated that we have to try to take care of, and you're going to keep your engine running correctly for a long time. If you have any questions, you can contact me at Brian at HammerDownDyno at yahoo.com. Thanks.